pretty extreme. I just can't imagine, the city water supply shutting down. Right now, in countries around the world, right now, today, in this civilized age, there are civilized countries. I'm not talking third world, civilized countries rationing water. It was interesting. Some of the global leaders that I just told you I was with all of last week or week before, time flies when you're driving around. One of them was from India. Now, in America, many of us think India, poverty. Well, they don't have a lot of money anyway. Lots of India is poor, but lots of India is not. There's a fair amount of India that's tell them we said hey. That's okay. There are places in India that are actually very, what we would consider very middle class, or in some cases even very wealthy. And he was telling me they still ration our water. The water will be on today. In some states or provinces, it's on every other day, on even days, and in others, it's on odd days. In some, it's only on a day a week. There are places in the Middle East where it's only on for an hour one day a week. And they have cisterns on the roof and cisterns in the ground and ways to and by the way, the one day it comes on, everybody and their grandmother wants some. And so the pressure is very low. So will that happen here? I don't know, but it would be a good idea to be prepared. And so, for example, if you can drill a well, I recommend having at least 2 sources of water and 3 if you can. City water is one. We're hooked up to city water. We'll use it as long as it's there and works and functions. But we also have a well. If you can, drill a well. And there's a lot of places where you can do that. If you've got an HOA, maybe they'll let you, maybe they won't. But you can even, if you get permission, if there's no governing body that says you can't, you can put a well in your backyard. It's going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000 to put one in, but it'll be a reliable source of water. Also, if you have land or property, or if you get land or property that backs up to a creek, stream, lake, something like that. We have all 3. That was another one of our criteria, by the way. We have city water. Our property also has a well, and if it didn't have one, I would drill one. But our property also backs up to a pretty substantial stream. We have a water purifier on our kitchen counter, not a water filter, a water purifier. If I have to go down to the creek and bring it back up to the house in a 5-gallon bucket, I can do that. We'll pour it right in the purifier and we're good to go. Not just for drinking water, but if it's hot, if there's a time of drought, how are you going to grow your own food if you can't get water? So another way to prepare is to have multiple sources of water. Yes?
How are you going to protect it from somebody taking it?
Well, nobody can take your city water. Nobody can take your well water.
You have to worry about more than a deer eating it. You'll have to worry about people, like when Katrina hit New Orleans, the way people go around stealing and ravaging.
You got a good point. His question was, how do you protect it? And how do you keep people from stealing it? That's a real threat. Get a gun. I have to be careful how I advise you to arm yourself. But let me just tell you, I'm prepared.
Good for you.
And again, I got to be real careful there. Like I said, I have the privilege of teaching under the leadership or under the authority of Blacksher Place. And I don't know, Jeff might draw the line if he thought I was telling everybody to go get a gun, but go get a gun.
Cover all the bases.
And by the way, we could do a Bible study on that. Are you right with God? I know that there's a lot of pacifists out there, a lot of Christian pacifists say, "Oh, you can't do that." If you do a Bible study on that, you'll find that not only you're expected to. You're expected. We could go into that on a different night. But are you right with God to own a firearm and to use it if you need to protect your family or even your neighbor? Yes, you are. And I'll leave that at that. But
it says, if you don't have a sword, trade in your cloak. They wore.
Yeah, Jesus told the disciples, one of the things he did at the Last Supper before he went to the cross, he said, sell your coat and buy a sword. So again, that's another, that'll be the class after the class.
That's a really good thing to barter with is ammo. Stockpile ammo. I'll say it.
Actually, in our culture, I don't necessarily know about other countries, but in our culture, she's right. She's right. In fact, I even talked to an attorney. It's been several months ago now, but I talked to an attorney, and he's a Christian, and he's mindful of what's going to come down the pike. He's got a whole lot more money than I do, and I asked him. I said, "What are you investing in?" And he said, "Gold, silver, and lead." And that's exactly what he said. The government at some point is probably going to heavily tax ammo sales. But what that's going to do is it's going to drive those sales back to private markets. And so, that's something else that you can barter with or whatever. But there might be ways to protect your garden. We have enough land that our garden is very isolated. Now, if you're hungry enough, you'll probably find it. But our garden's not right out on the road for that very reason.
In our HOA, we have plots. We shouldn't use that word in our age group. But we have these plots that people plant,
Yeah.
And somebody will steal somebody else's tomatoes or radishes, and it gets really. You need a gun when you go down there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. I've completely lost control now, so I don't. All I can do is move on. Municipal water supplies may become unreliable either in quality or quantity. Even in civilized countries right now, water in municipal. I think there's a typo there. Municipal water is often rationed or unclean. B, well water can be an inexpensive alternative. C, natural water sources can be used for irrigation or even drinking with proper purification. Streams, lakes. Another idea or alternative would be rainwater. Make yourself a cistern and capture rainwater. Roman numeral 6. Minimize. Now this one's tough. Let me just tell you up front, this one's kind of tough. It's tough for all of us. But it will be beneficial if you can keep this in mind. Minimize your exposure to the power grid. Now, it would be almost impossible for all of us to get off the grid. But at our home, one of the things we have is a generator. And incidentally, by the way, God it was incredible how God blessed us. We bought our home from someone already thinking this way. And so some of these things he had already put in place. And that's a story for another day, but it was just amazing how when we sat down to close our deal at the attorney's office, the attorney's watching us go back and forth, and we're bending over backwards to make sure the other one is happy. And the attorney finally said, he's just doing this, and the attorney finally, and he's a closing attorney, he finally said, "You know what?" He said, I close real estate deals all the time. This is what I do. And he said, "I have never seen two people." He said, "Usually the two parties are trying to take." And he said, "I've sat here at the table and watched you guys try to give to make sure the other one was happy." He said, "This must be a God thing. I don't feel right charging you for my services." That's what the attorney said at our closing table.
But he charged anyway, I bet.
No, he did not. No, he did not. He didn't charge us a dime, and he had his own people do our recording and deed recording and all that. So
Something's really wrong though when the Pope turns loose the doves and the doves get attacked by a crow or whatever else.
So minimize your exposure to the power grid. We're getting sidetracked again. We have a generator. Now, by the way, a generator is going to run on some kind of fuel, so that's not permanent. Our generator is actually propane. We have a 500-gallon propane tank buried, but you could do the same thing. Now, so if the power runs out, we can flip that on. We would use it sparingly, make it last as long as possible. Other things you can do, a wood-burning fireplace. Lots of folks have gas these days, but in many cases, a gas fireplace is also capable of burning wood. It's very easy to take the gas out, put wood in there. Again, there's no power there involved. If you were cold in the wintertime, or if you needed to cook, you could do that if you had to, very easily. If you've got a wood stove, We used to have a wood stove in a previous home, and believe it or not, we cooked on it a lot. Not because we had to, but it was fun and it was good. So there's lots of ways you can minimize your power usage if power is not available or if it's incredibly expensive. So none of this is brain surgery, but you might not be thinking about it in advance. Solar panels. Solar panels used to be prohibitively expensive. They're not anymore. The price of solar panels is continuing to come down, and as a matter of fact, you can make your own fairly easy. There's YouTube videos on how to make your own solar panels. So there are ways to tap into power sources that help minimize our exposure to the grid. Geothermal heating is another one. My own uncle has what they call a geothermal heating system. It's basically buried underground. It takes the heat from the ground. The earth is a constant temperature, 58 degrees. So in the wintertime, when the air is 22 or 32, you're 20-something degrees ahead of the game, and it takes that air and it heats it up. And you're a contractor, so you know what I'm talking about. Those aren't real cheap to put in, but once you put them in, boy, they sure are cheap to operate. So anything like this, you've probably got other ideas that you know that I don't know of. But if you've got ways to minimize your exposure to the grid, to the power grid, those would be good ideas. Roman numeral 7, develop barterable skills and resources, things you can trade with. I already mentioned earlier, being able to sew. Can you build furniture? Are you handy? Can you do repair work? If you've got a large garden plot and your neighbor doesn't have any, you can be able to barter food. But bartering will be something that will, used to, our culture did it a lot. We don't do it anymore. But in times of great hardship, that's one of the things that will come back. Dave Ramsey and I agree 100% on that one. Now, let's wind up with this. We're very near the end. And I just want to kind of begin to put all of this into perspective for us. Roman numeral 8. The above list is not for selfish purposes. The above list is not for selfish purposes. A, developing the aforementioned resources and skills is not, listen to me, it is not about living in fear and isolation. It is not. I'm not a doomsday prepper. That's a completely different mindset for a completely different reason. This is not about thinking the government's going to come after us. They're not, at least not in that sense. This is not about thinking a nuclear bomb is going to be dropped and I need some kind of bunker or shelter. That is not the point. B, it is not about hoarding for strictly personal use. It's not about that. C, it is about being able to provide for others also. Again, I want to grow enough food, not just for my family, but for somebody else's. We didn't want a big home. We were happier with a smaller home and more land, but you know what? We did want a guest room. In fact, we have 2 guest rooms. And it's not about having a bigger house. Come look how big my house is. It's so I got a place to put folks up. It's so that if there's somebody who's down, out, or they've been thrown out, or they've lost their home, or they're trapped, you know what? I'm going to be able to say, come in where it's warm. Come in and I'll feed you. And by the way, while you're here, I'm going to tell you why I've been blessed. While you're here, I'm going to share with you why I have the resources to do for you what I can do. And I'm going to share with you who is the source for your life, not just on this earth, but everlasting. This is about your testimony. This is about your witness. D, it is about having a powerful testimony before the world. It is about engaging evangelism from a credible platform. If we're just as down and out, not only financially, but down and out in spirit as the rest of the world, who wants to hear, what kind of testimony is that? Who wants to hear about our Jesus, if that's the case? The church, let's leading on into the next point. It's about the church becoming a source of ministry both spiritually and physically. It's about the church being not just spiritually equipped, but physically equipped to fulfill its mission. How would you like to be able to say, instead of just saying, I will pray for you, how would you like to put legs on that and say, not only will I pray for you, I'll provide for you? That's what God has called us to do. Never in the Scripture was our government charged with the responsibility of taking care of the poor. You and I were. And how many of us can afford to be the Good Samaritan? Many of us can't. But it's about time the church was in a position to do so. And the church has a narrow window of opportunity to prepare in just that way. So that when the wheels come off this wagon, this culture, this economy, this system that we live in, the bright spots are going to be in the church. The bright spots will be amongst God's people. You know, every now and then somebody asked me earlier, who was it? He might even be here tonight. Somebody asked me in one of the future lessons, why don't we hear this from other pastors? Why don't we hear this in other pulpits? Because it's a scary message, because it isn't popular. Because if they preach it, half their flock might leave. But, do you want to know the truth or not? Look, you want to read something scary? Don't tell me I'm scary. Read Matthew 24. Read Matthew 24 and tell me that's not scary. The reason why you read it and the reason why you're not scared is because you don't think it's going to happen to you. Guess what? Lift up your eyes, because your redemption draws near. And the days are here. The times are close to us. They are just a very short distance away in the future. God was not so interested in telling us what we wanted to hear. And for that matter, He was not even so interested in telling us what we needed to hear. He's interested in telling us the truth, period. And the truth will set us free. It's not about good news, which He gave us. We read the Bible and we hear good news, John 3:16. We hear bad news, John 6:66. God didn't make a distinction between good news and bad news. It's the truth. It is the truth. Messages and lessons like this might be hard to hear. But come on, folks. This is why men don't go to the doctor. I don't want to get bad news, so I won't go. But guess what? If I'm sick, my condition won't change one bit. As a matter of fact, I'll get worse. And the very people that are going to say in the culture now, I don't want to hear that, don't tell me, are going to be the first person that when the crisis comes, they're going to say, if you knew about this, why didn't somebody tell me? Well, the Bible has been telling us for hundreds of years. Now it's time to perk up, to sit up, and listen. Our attitude needs to be not one of fear. Fear is the opposite of faith. You realize that, don't you? Every now and then I hear somebody say, well, the opposite of faith,